A long, long, long time ago, in an actual country, far, far away, actually clear on the other side of the world, there once was a village. It was a poor village on the coast, and though most of the residents were just subsistence farmers, barely making it, there was one thing in that village that spoke of great wealth. It was the only thing in the whole village that actually had some financial value. It was in the center of town, a huge golden statue. I don't mean it was painted gold or gold plated. It was solid gold, over 6 foot tall. And one day, word came to the villagers that an invading army from a country next door was heading their way. They had no organized army of their own. It was a small village. They could fight if they wanted, but it was no use. They were going to lose. And that meant that the place was going to get raped and pillaged, and everything of value was going to be stripped away. It's like they were about to lose all that they valued, including the thing they valued most. Collectively, the village valued that solid gold statue. It was like their identity. It held them together. But there were a few smart people in that village with quick minds, and one of those quick minds spat out a brilliant idea. And the men of the village had the women go and gather mud and make a cement. And the best sculptor in town began to take that mud, that cement mix, and plaster it on top of the solid gold statue. They did it with great care, considering the amount of time that they had before the invasion started. They covered it every last inch with this muddy homemade cement stuff, and it was actually already hardened in the sun by the time the invading army arrived. And it looked pretty much the same shape, but no visible gold. Well, everything went pretty much according to what they expected. Sure enough, the army marched in unopposed. They began stealing the livestock, gathering all the corn and the vegetables from the field, stripped the land, stripped the people of whatever little possessions they had. But the army marched right by the gold statue and paid no attention to it. For what good is a clay statue? That's not anything valuable. And nobody said a word. And this army stayed, occupied the little village for like a whole generation. And during that generation, everybody was sworn to secrecy. Don't you dare tell anybody what this statue is really made of. And they kept such a good secret about it that eventually, over time, even after the invading army finally moved on, the secret was so well kept that finally all the people who remembered the statue was really made of gold died off. And they'd not told their children because, children might accidentally say something. And so these poor villagers kept living more generations, another and another, still not knowing what a treasure was right there in their midst. Until one day, A little kid was playing around the foot of the statue. Some other little mean boys from the community threw rocks at him. And he was quick and he dodged. But one of those rocks hit the statue. And when it did, there was a loud crack. And the boys were scared. And they ran. Oh no, we've torn something up. But then one of the mothers came to investigate, and she noticed that where the rock hit, there was not only a crack, a chunk of clay cement had fallen off, revealing what was actually inside, the gold. And the news began to spread. It only took 10 minutes. And soon everybody had gathered around the statue, and people began to take their picks, little picks, even sticks, and scrape and chip away that old clay that had now been there so long. And the more they chipped away, the more they discovered what had been there all along. And the more they unveiled the treasure that had been in their midst all this time without them knowing it. Now, what's the moral of a story like that? What's it really about? What's the metaphor? Well, like most good stories, it's really a story about us. The Bible says that you also have one thing in common with a statue, a golden statue, that human beings were formed in the image and the likeness of God. That's a pretty big deal. That's golden. But the same kind of thing that happened to those villagers tends to happen to us. We have a way of forgetting who we've always been and still are. In Psalm 139, verse 14 and 15, you have the words of one writer at least who knew he was golden. He was the golden boy. And he expressed his gratefulness to God for not only making him a treasure, but for reminding him of just who he was. And he said it to God like this: "Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it." And this is my favorite part. "You watched me as I was being formed in utter seclusion, as I was woven together in the dark of the womb." Now let the implications of that sink in. You watched me as I was being formed in utter seclusion, as I was woven together in the dark of the room, before your parents even knew a pregnancy had occurred. Before anybody else knew you were in there, God knew you. He watched you as you formed, as you were knit together. And that means God, if for no other reason, knows things about you that nobody else knows. And he knew things about you long before anybody else ever even met you or held you in their arms. Do you know that your DNA is fixed from the moment of conception. And what that means is, for example, I'll give you some examples of how that plays itself out. That means the general shape of your body has already been programmed. Now, I'm not saying that you are destined to a life of ugliness or beauty, because we do have some influence over that, but this much is true. Whether you were going to be tall or short, that was already in there, already programmed. Whether you were going to be big bone or small bone, whether you were going to be the kind of person who builds muscle easily and has fantastic coordination, or whether you were going to be the slender, swimmer type, whether you were going to have a tendency to metabolize fat really quickly, or whether you were going to have a tendency to hang on, all that was already in place. Now, there's this nature and nurture thing. How we're taught, what we learn, how we discipline ourselves, what other people shape us into, how we shape ourselves, all that matters too. It's not either or, it's both and. But I'm saying, there were things about you, your eye color, from the moment of conception, already set. Color of your hair, even whether or not you go bald eventually. All of that was in there, but there's something even more important that matters a lot more than your outer structure. The basic parts of your personality were in place from the very beginning. And what I mean by that is, do you know how you've discovered as you've moved along in life that there are certain things that you just find you're naturally good at? Things that come easy to you, and then there are other things that don't come so easily to you. There are certain things that you're drawn to and interested in, and other things that are a complete bore. Your abilities, your tendencies, at least the raw materials of all that were in there from the beginning. And here's the interesting thing. All of that was in you before anybody other than God even knew you were there. So now you see why the psalmist said, you watched as I was being formed in my mother's womb. God knows far more about you, and He's known you far longer than anybody else in the room or anybody else in your family. And God also knows and has always known that as a human being made in His likeness, there's some gold there. There's something precious in you. Don't forget that. All of us need people from time to time, starting from the time we're little all the way through old age, who will keep reminding us who we are, lest we forget, like the people in that village. Several years ago, I visited a Quaker retreat center in Pennsylvania. And I went there because the organizer of the place for many years had been one of my favorite writers. Parker Palmer is his name. And Parker Palmer wrote a book in which he wrote several books, but in one of his books, he told about how he wrote a letter to his granddaughter when she was only about 3 months old. But he sealed it, gave it to her parents. He said, this is to be opened on her 22nd birthday. And meanwhile, she wouldn't even know there was such a letter. And what do you think he put in that letter? I'll give you the high points of it. He said, I'm hoping, granddaughter, I'm hoping and I'm praying that you will discover, or at least rediscover in your 20s, what I did not rediscover until I was in my 50s. I want you to know who you've always been. I want you to know that by the time you read this letter, I may be gone. But what I'm observing in you right now is a basic part of who you are. You need to know about it. Here are some of the things he said. He said that I can already tell, 3-month-old granddaughter, that you already have a certain shape of your own. And he's not talking so much physical, he's talking her personality already showing. For example, there's a certain OBGYN doctor in the audience who told me that in twin studies, watching twins in the womb on ultrasound, if you study them carefully over time, you'll notice that often one of them is much more aggressive than the other. One's more active than the other. Maybe even a little bit mean, like he's jabbing his brother in the womb. Remember how in the story of Jacob and Esau, the Bible says that their mother felt something going on unusual in her womb. The boys were striving against one another, which is what they wound up doing in real life. And when they came out, Jacob had his brother by the heel, and they named him Heel Catcher, one who trips others up. And until he was completely converted later in life, that's pretty much the way he operated. But even twins, if you pay attention, the one that's more aggressive, antsy, wild, when they're born, that tends to be what continues. And what Parker Palmer noticed in his little girl, his little grandgirl, he said, I can already tell, though you're 3 months old, that there are certain things you are drawn to, and there are other things that you are repelled by. And then he went on to specifically describe what those are. He said, remember this, because this is part of who you are. Do not dare get into a permanent relationship or career that means being very closely involved in something that you are by nature repelled by. Instead, look for the people, look for the opportunities that you're drawn to. He said, here's a sketch of who you were from the start and who you still are. Think about that. He's writing it. She's 3 months old. She's reading it. She's going to read it when she turns 22. Here's a sketch of who you are and who you've always been. And I don't want you to forget it. What a loss that would be. Well, one other quote from Parker Palmer I want to put on the screen. It's tied to the title of today's sermon, Becoming the Person You Already Are. He simply said this: it can take a long time to become the person we've always been. If that doesn't automatically make sense, take a snapshot of the screen, take it home, stew on it, and it will start to, hopefully, as we go. It can take a long time to become the person you've always been. Now, how can somebody lose touch with the person they've always been? Well, it's very easy. And it happens to everybody, because from the time you pop out of that womb, there are people who have agendas for you. And I'm not talking necessarily about bad people. Hopefully, And in many cases, these are good people with the best of intentions for you. And they can look at you and they can already plan your life out for you and see exactly what you need to do and be. And I don't know, I didn't do it when my kids were babies, but by the time they were 14, I'd pretty well already picked out their wives for them. Other people with good intentions believe they know what you need to be. And here's something a little scary. I'm talking about just parents, maybe grandparents. They see something in you that reminds you of them, and a lot of people, especially men, with their sons, they start thinking, he's going to be an athlete. He is going to score touchdowns. The ones I wasn't able to cover. I'll tell you a quick story about my father. Excellent father. A big part of his identity in high school and still is that he was an excellent football player. Played at a little school in Excel, Alabama. And one night, Bear Bryant actually came and watched him play. But he didn't play at Alabama. But I do know this. When I got old enough to play Pee Wee football, the day I sacked a quarterback for the very first time, never before in my life and never since then have I experienced such pure delight coming from my father to me. Never before and nothing since. And you know, if the Broncos don't draft me pretty quick, it may not happen. I mean, I'm almost 50. You know? Listen to what the Swiss psychologist Carl Jung said. Let this sink in. Nothing has a stronger influence psychologically on, I think I must have turned that text in a little wrong. Let me read it. Nothing has a stronger influence psychologically on a child than the unlived life of the parent. There's the parents, and then we start Sunday school. And then we start school, and there are certain expectations that's just part of getting in touch with culture and learning how to operate in culture. There's a certain way you dress. There's a certain way that you walk. You quickly learn what's cool and what's not cool, what will get you bragged on and what will get you picked on. And all these things begin to shape us according to the values of other people. And sadly, a lot of those other people whose values are shaping us are just as immature as we are. And if we're not careful, here's what happens to us. We betray who we really are in order to gain the acceptance and approval of the world around us. We betray the true self, the soul that God saw from the beginning, in an attempt to become more what other people expect us to be or want us to be. And we can lose touch with who we are. And that is at least part of what Jesus was talking about in Mark chapter 8, verse 36 and 37. He uses the word soul, which is one you're all familiar with. You could also think of it as your true self, the person you were from the beginning, the person you'll be after you die, once all your labels and all your uniforms and all the many hats you wore throughout various seasons of life, the roles you had to play, once all that is gone and left behind, your true self soul is who you were, who God knew before anybody else, and who God will know long after everybody else has forgotten. Here's his question. What do you benefit if you gain the whole world, but lose your own soul? Is anything worth more than your soul? What benefit would it be if you achieved all your parents' goals and you became everything your teachers and coaches and friends hoped, dreamed, told you could be, which nobody ever actually does completely, by the way. But what if you could? And yet in the process of gaining the whole world and the world's affirmation, you lost your own soul. You forgot you were made of gold. And you settled for being a mud statue that the world created, that really just covered you up. At some point in life, most people begin sensing this strange, difficult to pinpoint gut feeling that something is just not quite right. And at first it doesn't make sense, especially if you've done all the right things. And by right things, in this context, I'm talking about all the things that you were told you were supposed to do, needed to do. What if you've done all that and something just isn't quite right? Well, here's what most people will do. Whether it happens in your 20s, which is unlikely, or midlife, or better late life than never. Okay? Pay attention to your feelings. On one hand, feelings can be deceptive. Don't believe everything you think. You've heard me say that. Some of the stuff we think is ridiculous and just lead us into trouble. But also, and don't believe everything you feel, because sometimes you will feel like somebody's betrayed you when really they didn't. Certainly not on purpose. So you may feel like somebody insulted you when they're not even aware of what they said, or maybe you even misheard what they said. Don't believe everything you think or everything you feel. But when you have this deep-seated, growing awareness, something's not right, pay attention to that. That is a gift, not from the world. Flesh and blood did not reveal that to you. It's coming from within, where the Spirit dwells. It's letting you know. The goal has been forgotten. And you're increasingly caking onto yourself more and more things that smother the soul. And here's what I have done in such cases. I know I need to buy something new. And I'm talking about over the course of my adulthood, I need to move. I need to be living in a different place. That's it. I need a new hairdo. Some people, I need a different spouse. Need some cosmetic surgery of some kind. Well, and let me say this very clearly. All those things are not always a mistake. Sometimes there's some validity there. I'm not saying those things are always wrong, no. But I am saying that those things cannot scratch the itch that's coming from deep inside. They'll just postpone the inevitable. And they'll make it easier for you to lose your soul. Here's the deal. By midlife, a whole lot of people have already settled for something much cheaper, much more artificial and unmeaningful and dissatisfying than they could have had and still can have if they will remember who they really are. And this is your letter reminding you, whatever age you are, here's who you were before you began trying to become whatever you thought you were supposed to become. It can take a long time to become the person you always were. Now, here's what will happen if you're lucky. If you are fortunate enough, something is going to come flying out of nowhere like a rock, and it's going to hit you so hard that you crack. Just like the stone that cracked the cement on the golden statue. And your first thought, why did this happen to me? Poor me. All this always happens. And on your tombstone you put, I expected this. Other people, some people take on victim mentality, others take on mad, rage. You know those people that walk around with a permanent scowl? I mean, it gets etched in the face. They're mad at life and they don't even know why. If you're lucky, you'll get hit, smacked hard enough by something that cracks the outer coating. And it might be an injury that takes away some of your independence. It might be an aging body and you can no longer sack quarterbacks. And that hits you hard. It might be a heartbreak, a betrayal, a job loss, a divorce, a child who rebels and stops speaking to you. And all of those things, when they first hit, pop, it'll sting. And it may hurt. But it may well be the best thing that's happened to you in a long time if it cracks you open. And you or somebody close to you begins to recognize, hey, there's actually something underneath there. And that's when you begin spending the rest of your life chipping away piece by piece. Sometimes with chisels, other times picking it out with little ice picks. The mud that covers who you really are. It can take a long time to become who you really are. To recover it, to rediscover it. And of all the influences, of all the teachers who've ever lived, the one who most wants to see you become who you've always been, the one who most wants to see your soul saved, your true self preserved, not only preserved, but developed, flourishing and shining, Jesus Christ. He who knew you first loves you most. And here's an unfortunate thing. I am so aware as a minister. I've seen it for almost 25 years now. So many people have had experiences in church or with church people that were negative, oppressive, that were doing anything but trying to chip away the junk. They were piling it on and trying to force us into certain molds. And unfortunately, that does happen. And if it's happened to you, don't feel too sorry for yourself because it happened to All of us. From some place or another. But here's what I see. Because of things like that, a lot of people want nothing to do with Christ because they've misunderstood, understandably, some of his representatives have misrepresented him. And they see Christ as someone who's trying to squash their creativity, someone who wants to bend and twist them into something they were never, something that's just not them. Here's the good news. Nobody wants to see you preserve your soul and live out of your true self more than Jesus Christ. One more verse before I close. It's John 10 and verse 10. Jesus said, the thief's purpose is to kill, steal, destroy. My purpose is to give them a rich, satisfying life. That is what Jesus Christ wants to happen in you and in me and in many of us. That process has already begun. And you need to know that it's not only okay, it is what you are supposed to be doing. Whatever it is you have to unlearn, whatever it is, these artificial images of who you think you are, usually have to do with ego. By the way, if you don't chip them away for yourself, old age will take care of it. And even that's not a curse. That's a gift in disguise that begins to show what's underneath. It can take a long time to become the person you've always been.